Well, hello everyone. My name is Ashnandoa and I'm co-hosting today's show. Today we have Raisa of Premiers in the GoldRing Game of Enlightenment and Abundance and the great honor of interviewing Freeman, producer and host of the Freeman Perspective, as well as author of the Freeman blog. So this should be very interesting. We have two leading radio show hosts discussing leading-edge issues involving symbolism, government conspiracies, mind control, and ancient civilizations. On the Freeman blog, we'll be posting you the links on the chat here, and on his website, he covers a great number of topics, including corporate logos in Colombia, merfolk, Nephilim. He's done a lot of interviews himself and some very interesting people that you can see there on his website as well. He's also author of the Freeman Perspective, Codex Magica, Return of the Nephilim, and many, many other documentaries, I guess. Freeman is considered an expert in the fields of the occult, trauma-based mind control, government conspiracy, and ancient civilizations. He graduated with an Associate of Arts with honors in interdisciplinary studies and attended Kansas University, specializing in ancient environmental architecture. Freeman's film subjects include the occult meanings of corporate logos, America's Goddess, Columbia, weather modification, space-based weapons, chemtrails, ancient astronauts, Anna Nicole's death, Britney Spears and Disney mind control, cloning technology in the ancient past and today. Freeman, are you on here? I'm going to talk a little more a bit about you before I introduce the host and the other co-host as well. Hello, Freeman. Oh, he's muted. So we'll unmute him.
Am I there now?
There you are. So you were born in the middle of summer.
The middle of the summer of love.
And a very shy boy most of your life. That
Yes,
didn't speak to classmates until grade 6. A very intelligent young lad, from what I hear, too.
Constantly an honor student, no doubt about that, but I think the bane of my teacher's existence, though.
And with always a great sense of compassion as well. Your life has been an adventure from the beginning, and you wanted to be a spaceman as a child and not in the meaning of astronaut, right?
That's true.
Your father would be his ties to it, and your mother as well?
Yes, well, my own personal research came from ancient astronaut research, such things as Erich von Däniken and the idea of gods from outer space. And the UFO interest came from my own continuous experiences that I really have no recollection of, which is, strange for most people that have these type of occurrences, that they occurred. You discuss the UFOs with your friends, but you have no recollection now at an adult of the actual craft or anything that occurred. So I've had a long line of UFO experiences throughout my life and even up into my adult life. Recently, having a large V-shaped craft fly over my car on my way to meet the high priest of the Church of Satan. Or a large rectangular craft that was hovering over Daytona Beach when I graduated from college, in which me and a friend lost 5 hours of time. And it was at that moment that I began to predict world events. And I don't know that, I have the sensation that I was shown the future. But I don't know that that's the case.
You predict world events also not so much in the form of how a psychic does, but you use all of the background in your studies as well as your digging into the Freemasonry and everything else with their symbology. Now, can you explain that a bit further?
Sure. What we see are a lot of symbolic gestures. One of the prime examples would be the capping of the Great Pyramid with gold for Y2K. So this, to me, was a suggestion that they had completed their Novo Ordo Seclorum and brought out their New World Order. It's these type of symbolic gestures that can clue you into what they're after, as long as you're also coupling this with the political agenda. So we have ceremonial magicians with a political agenda. So you can put these two things together. So yeah, my predictions were based on a formulaic science that I had somewhat attuned myself to. And like I say, as far as the flying rectangle story, I have no knowledge of anything that occurred. All I know is I lost 5 hours. But then from that moment on, I seemed to see the pattern. And I don't usually equate it with that story. I usually keep those two separate because the pattern is real. The idea of what I saw was real. And what I was looking at was psychological warfare on a grand scale to bring about a global government. And this is something that many know and many talk about, but what they don't recognize is the magical or ceremonial aspects of it all. And then also the esoteric or occult or extraterrestrial connections of it all. So once you take in the idea and the understanding of ancient civilizations, you recognize that there are things from our ancient past that we cannot explain nor reproduce, such as Baalbek, Lebanon, that has blocks that are 800 tons, too large for any of our modern cranes to move, and yet they had been moved from large distances to where they stand in Lebanon today. And there they stand to make us question. The Great Pyramid.
And Easter Island as well.
Easter Island,
Now,
Peru, yeah.
And the capping of the stone, can you talk about that? You mentioned it a little bit earlier with this, with the event.
The capping of the Great Pyramid. Well, what you start to recognize is that this occult brotherhood deals with magical science. And so when you start to understand Satanism, when you go talk to the high priest of the Church of Satan, he's not going to be talking to you about this evil god, Satan. I don't think most of the beliefs of Satanism have anything to do with Satan in the biblical sense. But what they will talk to you about is creating etheric machines that are to open portals in the other dimension to let the old ones enter, as Rex Church has his Ragnarok engine to do this very thing. You realize that Satanists are into high-tech occultism, that Jack Parsons of Jet Propulsion's laboratory was a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which was Aleister Crowley's cult when he took over, and all of the connections to our high sciences keep going back to these ancient mystery schools. And so when you start to get to dates and watching periods of time, what we realize is most of these ancient structures of Luxor in Egypt or Tiahuanacan in Mexico, all of these different structures are set up to watch time. They are watching the sun at very specific moments, calculating them with certain stars so that you can determine where you're at in the universe. Well, this timeline seems to outline, perhaps, as some have suggested, a catastrophe, a cyclical catastrophe that occurs on Earth and therefore leaving us devastated. And as the ancient tales tell us, that there was a race that had superior technology in the ancient past, and then there were those that were running around after the Great Flood or the catastrophe that had no more technology, civilization, or even agriculture or any of these things. And so the great civilizers came, and they imparted these civilizations onto nations. So Egypt, there is no pre-Egypt. It just is. It just came into being. So obviously a transplant colony from somewhere. Many equate to either Atlantis or even Mars as an extrastellar civilization. So the capping of the Great Pyramid with gold was a symbolic gesture by the elite to announce that they were moving towards this final closure of this New World Order. Because as you see on the pyramid on the dollar bill, the Eye of Osiris or Horus or Set, depending on who you want to believe, is floating above the pyramid as a work in progress. And then when capped the Great Pyramid, that is the completion. Well, throughout the entire Y2K ritual, we saw where they made this symbolic gesture to Horus. And so they burnt the river Thames to the speed of the sun with fireworks. They had ignited each of Osiris's phalluses, the Eiffel Tower and the Washington Monument. They then had the sun rise in the west over the Lincoln Memorial, making a light so bright in America it could be seen in Europe as if the sun was rising. The sun of the west, again, is Horus. And the capping of the Great Pyramid was supposed to occur during the 12 Dreams of the Sun performed by Jean-Michel Jarre, and a helicopter was to bring this giant golden capstone to rest upon the top of the pyramid. But there was much controversy about this. And Zahi Hawass, I believe, was, yes, in charge of the Giza Plateau at that time. Now he is absolute head of the Giza Plateau. At that time, he was undersecretary. He is all connected up with the ARE, with Edgar Casey, and the connections with the lost, hidden knowledge of Egypt. And he's even announced finding the tomb of Osiris deep under the pyramids. Okay, so as you start to see these symbolic gestures unfolding, what happened was that the capping was canceled, but what was curious is that there was an Egyptian flight leaving out of LAX, out of LA, and flying to LaGuardia in New York, and then taking off to the Giza Plateau prior to the capping of the Great Pyramid with gold. Now, there was picked up, now it was said by Richard Hoagland and a few others that this jet made a mysterious stop at Edwards Air Force Base, and there picked up 33 Egyptian military and a head scientist of Jet Propulsion's laboratories. Now, once again, back to the occult. And they flew these 33 and a scientist to to New York to leave off for the Giza Plateau, and as they were flying off of the bay, they suddenly took a nosedive into the ocean. Now, the pilot had regained control of the airplane, and then it crashed again. And this time, the pilot calls out a Muslim prayer as this plane of all these people, 218, I think, went crashing into the ocean. Now, this was before 9/11. This was before terrorists, quote unquote. So when this plane crashed, they classified it as pilot suicide. But it was just after the crashing of these 33 Egyptian military with their rocket scientists that they canceled the Great Pyramid with gold, having a headline in the USA Today even stating, "Muslims stop the Freemasons from capping the Great Pyramid with gold." Now, very few people noticed that headline on the USA Today in December of '99. I wish I had kept a copy, but I did not. So as we start to witness the symbolic gestures and understand who they are, we bring this back to the occult. We understand that Aleister Crowley had said we were moving into the Aeon of Horus, the crowned and conquering child, and that this all equated to the number 11. And this is where we'll get to the symbolism of 9 and 11 and how this equates to sinister nature. You can start to put together what's going on.
Gregorian calendar that was established for this?
Well, there is a lot of belief about that there were much better calendars that could have been used back when they decided on the Gregorian calendar. I believe it was a Japanese scientist who had actually, I'll have to double check that, but there were better calendars than the one that we selected. And this one did seem to outline and set up a way so that 2000 fell at that moment, with the astrological alignments with Sirius and Alpha Draconis. Mm-hmm. So when you start to understand this, then you realize, okay, there's this synarchy, an oligarchy of fraternal mystery schools that rule our planet, that work within occult nature, and then also on psychological warfare. So when Bill Clinton came into office and he was taken down for a sexual affair that most people went, so, whatever. Most of our presidents have had affairs, and it's normally national security. When they brought Bill Clinton down, they made it all public and had him sitting out there purple in front of the public discussing insertions of cigars into Monica Lewinsky. This, to me, was psychological warfare. This was the key ingredient to me that set me off on the path that made me say that from this moment on, they're going to force a president into office, and then the president following him would not be considered an American. So the reason being was that to force the president was to bring down our ideal of the system. So first they brought down the man, the saxophone-playing Bill Clinton. Then they brought down the system by forcing a president into office, and then the next president to be considered ineligible because they want to bring down the Constitution. So this was the path that I saw. Then that's the political spectrum. So
you saw that when?
When Bill Clinton was brought before on the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Mm-hmm. Because it's unheard of, right? We do not bring our presidents out in front of the public and discuss the type of things that they discussed with Bill Clinton in front of everyone. This is not normal. And so it had to have been psychological warfare. So what were they trying to do? They're trying to bring down and design a global world and therefore they needed to bring down this bastion of freedom. So we now have been designated as Satan, and you will see that as we get through the ritual aspect of this. So that's the political aspect. Then when you start to recognize...
And that we've been designated as Satan as in the Americas, you mean?
Yes, yes.
And designated by...
Well, in the psychological warfare. So we're supposed to be hated at this point. And so as we moved out from the Bill Clinton era, I had said, okay, I heard the rumblings of this W, and at that point had started to learn the Kabbalistic meaning of W. So what you need to realize is that Freemasonry is Kabbalism. The founder of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the one that organized, well, not the founder, but the one who organized all of the rituals and degrees, Albert Pike, in his main thesis called Morals and Dogma, states over 70 times that Freemasonry is Kabbalism. Kabbalism is an ancient Hebrew form of mysticism. So each of your transliterations need to go to Hebrew. So when we look at something like W, when you see that letter, in Hebrew, that's 6 and 6, because V equals 6. And 6 and 6 in Kabbalah is the number of the dark side. It's what's known as the Qliphoth, or the shells, the dark side of the tree of life. So when we start to see this numerology, like Phillips 66, Highway 66, we're seeing the number of the dark side gendered. Now, we can take this even further back to Adolf Hitler, who was also a practicer of ancient Hebrew mysticism in his study of theosophy with Madame Blavatsky. And he incorporated this very VV or W symbolism into his Volkswagen car of the people. And you will see that the Volkswagen logo is a W interlaced. So it's two V's forming three V's. So you've got your 66 of the fallen angels, or the dark side, crossed together, making a third 6, therefore being 666, being the numerological value of VW. There's many meanings. 6 is a Christ number. 6 is Tepereth in the tree of life. It's the Christ number. But 66 is the inversion, or the Antichrist, or the dark side of the tree, or what's known as the fallen ones, or fallen angels. So W is the letter of the fallen angels. Or his father, who was HW, would be the emperor, because H being the letter of the emperor card in the Tarot in Kabbalism. He would be emperor of the fallen angels, HW. And of course we know he was deeply steeped in the occult, connected with the skull and bones, known as Magog, right? There to bring about Armageddon. So when you start to recognize that they are these elite occult orders, then you can start to put the two together. You take the political spectrum and you couple it with the occult spectrum. So I correctly predicted that they would force W into office. Now, the psychological effect of this was to make everyone angry. And so they told you flat out, oh yeah, he was forced in by Jeb Bush, as if this were some sort of Bushian coup. But the fact that I could predict that W was going to be forced into office shows that this was planned long before, and not a Bushian coup. There are not separate presidents running through our elections. This is one long psychological warfare scheme. And so, therefore, that's how I predicted W would be into office. And the next to be ineligible. Am I still coming through?
Yes, we just
okay,
have okay. All right. Sorry. No, keep going, actually.
Ineligible president. And Barack Hussein Obama, or Barry Sartoro, Barry Dunham, Barack Dunham, Barack Sartoro, whatever name you want to pick for this man, Barack Hussein Obama comes into office, and not only is he ineligible before he's even elected, because he's not a natural-born citizen. Now, he admitted this himself when he was running for senator and questioned about his non-natural-born status, and he said, well, I'm not running for president. And, of course, then we have the recent video that has just been released, but from 2008, when Michelle Obama was speaking before the gay and lesbian, bi, and pansexual group, stating that Obama had returned to his home country, Kenya, to take an HIV test.
Now, also at that time, there was McCain, like as a backup in case.
Exactly.
Obama?
He was ineligible as well, being born in Panama. Because the whole question was to bring about this constitutional convention, which they have been pushing left and right all through the Bill Clinton era, just as they were pushing the Patriot Act all during the Bill Clinton era, which is how I predicted a major terrorist attack on 9/11/2001, because I knew that they needed to pass the Patriot Act in October. And once they had the W, the fallen one, into office, I knew that would be the year. And then, of course, the taking down of the tower, if you put that Twin Tower right up next to the tarot card of the tower, you will see it's identical in ceremony. So realize who our leaders are and what they're doing. It's not simply about power and money. This is magic. So Barack Obama, coming into office, being ineligible by his natural birth, and then also being ineligible by flubbing the inaugural oath, and then taking the inaugural oath in secret in case conspiracy theorists thought there might be some trouble with the first one, right? So they go off in secret and take another one, which he walks out of and says, well, I forgot my Bible, but it still counts. So ineligible, 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 just one after another. And this was the game plan from day one. You can see on my website from 2006, I said W would be considered the last American president. So this is something that is
this like the blogspot part?
It's on all my websites. Freeman TV is all you need, really. Everything I've done is on Freeman TV now. It's either freemantv.com or freeman.tv. Take your pick. But I absolutely have been making these world predictions publicly for 5 years now, because I did not make the 9/11 prediction public on a grand scale like I'm doing now. I did it in my hometown, you know, telling everyone I knew. And, of course, I had a line of people at my door on 9/11 asking, demanding how I knew that this was going to happen. And, honestly, I had no idea what they were talking about because I did not have television, nor a calendar, for that matter. So I didn't know what day of the week it was, and I didn't know what had happened. But what was really curious...
On 9/11.
Right. I had no idea. I was just woken by all these people at my door demanding how I knew, and I kept, you know, demanding, what do you mean? It took me over a week to actually see the Twin Towers fall. And here I'd predicted it. And let me tell you, I predicted that in 1998. So just so you know, that's when I started telling people about the 9/11 symbolism, the reason it would be 9/11. Well, part of the reason always is political, and part of it's always occult. So the political reason for 9/11 was the passing of the Homeland Security Act, which was going through Bill all through the Bill Clinton era, and it came up to Bill every October 1st. So I simply applied a little bit of logic and said, okay, if they want to affect this change, they want this Homeland Security to be real in America, which no one would accept, they need a major terrorist attack, for one, and it needs to happen somewhere in the middle of September for the emotional reaction to be ready when the Patriot Act comes up for Bill again in October. So this is something that was going on through the entire Bill Clinton era. So every middle of September, I'm waiting. But as I'm waiting, I'm also learning, and I started to learn the meaning of the numbers 9/11. And it was Bill or H.W.'s announcement of the New World Order for the first time publicly that cued me into the date or the number. And I began researching this number. And you can find that Kenneth Grant of the OTO, who took over for Aleister Crowley, he explains the numbers 9/11 long before this ever occurred. You know, we're talking 20 years, 25 years ago. Isaac Bonowitz, the only academically accredited magician who got a degree in magic from Berkeley, identifies and outlines the sinister nature of the numbers 9 and 11, 25 years, 30 years before 9/11 occurred. So the numbers 9/11 have been a satanic or Luciferian number since day one. And it has to do with the tree of life. It has to do with skipping God. You see, 10 is the equal number of God, the hermaphroditic symbol, the same as your point and circle on target. This is the symbol of the unity, the male-female. But if you go from 9 to 11, starting your next tree of life, being the magician on the next level, by skipping 10, you are then a Luciferian or a sorcerer. And so that is the true encoded meaning of the numbers 9/11. It wasn't that when you see it in The Matrix or when you see it in so many numerous movies that showed the numbers 9/11, Independence Day, another.
So why the need for the ritualistic sacrifice?
Well, of course, one is the political aspect. The other is the ritual sacrifice to the gods. This is something that they have continuously done throughout time, and many people in the military do not realize who they're dealing with and what they're actually fighting for. The concepts of nations are a farce. They're manufactured mythos. George Washington never cut down a cherry tree. Betty Ross never designed the American flag. America is not named after Amerigo Vespucci. These are all mythos to keep us in line. The creation of nations is due to illumined secret societies that are crafting a one-world system based on their belief system. Now, that's when it starts to get weird, is when you realize that what their ceremonial magic is, and what all ceremonial magic is the invocation or evocation of other dimensional entities. Call them spirits, call them angels, call them demons, Enochian gods, whatever you want. That's the purpose of ceremonial magic. So when people ask the question, why would H.W. form a new world order that he was not going to live to see? It is because through these ceremonial rituals, they have made contact with higher dimensional beings. And these are the very essence or entities that are creating and crafting civilization.
And this goes back to the establishment on the planet?
This goes back to ancient Egypt and in connection with Atlantis. This gets into what is known as the Council of the Nine, or the Nine Gods, the Ennead of Egypt. The Atun, Gebs, Shu, Tefnut, Osiris, Isis. These are the nine great gods of Egypt. Now, recently I had just become aware of the Stargate conspiracy by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince, which was written right before the capping of the Great Pyramid with gold. And they were on the exact same trip that I was on, except for I had certain clues that they did not, and they had certain clues I did not. And you can see that here are two separate investigators coming to the same conclusions, and they themselves were asking the question, well, why is it that the elite would believe in these channeled entities, as it were? Because what was happening was this nine was being channeled to people like Henry Wallace, the head of agriculture, who also was the person behind putting the pyramid on the dollar bill in the first place. The occult orders. You start to recognize what they're doing. Why do they go in these temples and perform these rituals? Most of the Masons themselves don't even know. But as you start to dig deeper and deeper, you realize that this is what it's about. Well, one quick example of the military aspect of this type of ritual is the shock and awe. Now, when they started on Walpurgis night and ended on the vernal equinox. And what we have here is a time within the occult orders that it's believed that the living and dead realms mesh. And at this moment, they then attack Saddam Hussein, who America had put into power. Now, Saddam Hussein, during this time, was claiming to be Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated, and he was rebuilding Nebuchadnezzar's palace with statuary of himself as Nebuchadnezzar, with artwork commissioned as himself as Nebuchadnezzar, and claiming straight lineage, and also being the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. When we came in and struck Saddam Hussein, or Nebuchadnezzar, we used the shock and awe campaign, or rapid dominance as it's known. But shock and awe plays on the Hebrew word, the Shekinah, which was the force of God that surrounded the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this is very important in Freemasonry. And absolutely in Freemasonry, you practice this ritual. They carry the Ark of the Covenant, and they say that the Shekinah in Freemasonry is that invisible cloud of brotherhood that surrounds the Masonic altar. So this was the voice of God. So the Shekinah, comes down and strikes Nebuchadnezzar, Saddam Hussein, using the mother of all bombs, which was shortened in military acronym as the Moab, and you'll find that it was the Moabites that Nebuchadnezzar was dealing with. So you have the Shekinah come down, strike Nebuchadnezzar using the Moabs. So we see ritual coupled with political spectrums.
Wow. So, okay. The planning of everything and the use of the media in bringing these events out and subconsciously, I guess, into the public is done for what reason? because everyone says everything's hidden in plain truth. They're doing these rituals and also celebrating them through the media, however barbaric they are.
So yes, there are many things coded around us that no one recognizes. The sun sign of Target, the pentagram of Walmart, the bitten apple on your Macintosh, the fact that Fox equals 666 in English. There are a lot of signs and symbols, the pentagram of Texaco or the shell of Shell, that we see each and every day. But they have no meaning to us. They have no effect. They're not magical emblems to bring about some sort of change in your consciousness or anything of this nature. They're signs of allegiance to the Brotherhood, but they do have point, purpose, and meaning. So when you see the shell and the pentagram, these are symbols of Venus. Now, as you go through a death and resurrection ritual inside of a Masonic lodge, you are then brought to the light of Venus. When you look up Venus in your dictionary or look up Lucifer, you will see they are one and the same. So basically you're saying we are being brought to the light of Lucifer. And you will find Lucifer constantly being played on in Theosophy, being played on in Freemasonry, and that they believe this is the illumined God that is actually the supreme deity, and Yahweh is the evil one. So as you take on these seething powers of Lucifer within the lodge, this is the practice, and then what you'll realize is each of these are out there in front of your face. So you have the Luciferian symbols all around you. When you see in Hollywood, there is such a connection here as well with the Phoenix, and you will find the Phoenix constantly going through this, and that was Aleister Crowley's secret name within the AA, or the Argentum Astra, which was his higher occult order. The Phoenix, also searching for dark matter here in America with the Brookhaven Institute, and landing on Mars with the Phoenix lander. This is a constant theme. We find that Phoenix Pictures in Hollywood shows a friction match being struck, which then becomes the sun low on the horizon and then boils up into a fiery phoenix. Well, the friction match is a Lucifer. So there you go. Now you got Lucifer Pictures. Now what films do they put out? Well, they put out a film about Nazi worship written by Stephen King, who's also been shown in the Pharaonic Death Pose. Then they put out Holes, which is about child labor camps run by Sigourney Weaver, and that was a compilation between Phoenix Pictures and Walt Disney about child labor camps. And then The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was pushing strongly the stem cell research at this time for human cloning. And we realized that The Sixth Day is all based on, all about the dangers of human cloning and the fact that...
So how does Arnold Schwarzenegger figure into all this as well? He aligned himself politically there in his marriage and...
Well, he's a Nazi, just like the Pope. He came out of those same roots, his father being an SS officer, and then we once again, must make the connection that these are not military, but occult orders that were trying to find the Ark of the Covenant, trying to find the Spear of Destiny, trying to find secrets of all of these mysterious... Now, let me just say that they just announced before we went into Yemen and before everyone went to the Gulf of Aden that they had found proto-Canaanite shards that suggested that the Ark of the Covenant was in Yemen. Next thing you know, NATO, Japan, China, America are all there in Yemen. In 1985, they were announcing this anomalous magnetic anomaly there in the Gulf of Aden, and this is where they say that Cain was buried, who also plays heavily into Masonic ritual. So when you look at the SS, when you look at the Nazis, you once again got to go back to these ancient stories, ancient ideas of magic and God, and realize how this all comes together. So Arnold Schwarzenegger plays right into that.
So the passion that behind this driving you to find or determine these rituals or ceremonies and what's transpiring now is to bring out what and prevent or show an alternative.
Right. Well, that's the whole key. That what we realize then, once you take all of this into perspective, you take Albert Pike's idea of magic, that it is the perfect knowledge of nature and its exact science, and that would be magic. So when you start to recognize that they're dealing on miraculous levels, they're dealing with forces that we would call the Shekinah or the Spirit of God or the Holy Spirit, then we realize that that's where the whole path of life is. That everything else they're placing in front of us is all just illusion. The ideas are all there to make you angry. The idea that Obama's spending all kinds of money, or that you don't have any money, or any of these, the octomom, all of these things are there just to engender anger in you. And so all of this is an emotional play. And what we realize is that we live in a miraculous universe, and that's what we start to discover. But very few people are willing to set aside the Brotherhood's programming to walk out and discover the miraculous. And it's when you're within the miraculous, when events are so coincidental that you know God is playing a part in your life, that's when you start to recognize the level of experience that we need to deal with. That's where our leaders are at. That's what they are manipulating with their sorcery. And that's what we can manipulate through our love vibe, through our understanding, through generating the true synchronistic, miraculous lifestyle that humanity needs. Because money was a key ingredient in taking that from us. Now, when you realize money's Luciferian agenda, you realize that it took away all your gratitude, you see. Money gave you the power to go take things, to think that you deserve them, to believe in yourself, and take away all the gratitude of the miraculous. And that was the major separation and a major spell that removed humanity's human nature.
Okay.
Yes, we're here and everybody's open.
Freeman, one of the things we're very focused on is another coming date. As we all know that you had been able to predict the 9/11 based on your occult training, and also the 10/13 event with the basically the takeover of the financial institutions of the United States and the destruction of the economy. And now you're looking at another date coming up in the very soon, around July 4th. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Now, as I was saying, that the Ark of the Covenant plays heavily into this entire story when you realize that the whole concept of the Masonic ritual is the building of Solomon's temple to house the Ark of the Covenant. And when you get to the ancient tales of the Ark of the Covenant, it seems very much like some sort of weapon of mass destruction given to the Hebrews in the ancient past. So as we start to look to this picture and pull all the pieces together, the 1013, that came together because of the symbolic gestures I saw. Now, on the Twin Tower cornerstones, they were dated to 9/11. On the Pentagon cornerstone, it was dated to 9/11. This is a very curious coincidence. So I began watching different cornerstones as well, and of course George Washington, the fine Freemason that he was, Masonically laid the cornerstone of the White House on 1013. Now 1013 was the dating of the announcement that the Templars were to be disbanded. So when the Pope and the King came together to disband the Templars, it was Friday the 13th, October 13th, 1307. So it was in these type of symbolic gestures that I was able to follow and would have predicted even the dates or the buildings of the attack had I known those cornerstone dates, because I was focused on the number. 1013, you'll find, is also the production company of Chris Carter, who put together the Lone Gunman, whose pilot episode outlined the 9/11 scenario to a T before it ever happened. We find that, so following different symbolic gestures of these elite, then we can start to determine what's going on. So the new tower going up, which was called the Freedom Tower, now called the One World Tower, had its Masonic cornerstone dated to the 4th of July. They opened the crown of the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July, and the crown is the Shekinah, again, of this goddess. And I started to notice other gestures like the Pope announcing that he had investigated it was secretly announced that he was investigating the Illuminati and the Templar, and then suddenly he comes out and says, oh, we found this 600-year-old document exonerating the Templar from all of their past sins. And we'll find, they've already given up on the geocentric universe. Now they're announcing their conference about aliens, and now the Templars are all okay in our world. So it's these type of symbolic gestures that lead me down the path and made me realize that the next major play in this global scheme would be to take the Temple Mount. And so it was on the 4th of July that the Templars lost the Temple Mount. And I believe that the Pope, head inquisitor, ex-Nazi youth, born in Bavaria, is going to make moves on the Temple Mount for the 4th of July, symbolically, and that this will spark a holy war, and therefore World War III will begin. Now, I'm sorry. Just a thought, as I was saying this last year, because like I say, I talked about 9/11 for 4 years before it happened. Last year I was discussing this 4th of July event, and this was right before the 4th of July, and the Pope made moves on the Temple Mount that month in July, before the 4th though, or maybe it was the end of June, and he was the first pontiff to ever visit the Temple Mount, and he said he was going to take it back for Christianity. So I thought maybe they were going to do it that year, last year, and because it didn't occur, but yet he did make these statements and did make the move. I'm still expecting that to occur, because when we look into Albert Pike, the head of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Now, I've been talking with the lead Masons here in town and trying to find the separation between the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. And most of them believe that the Scottish Rite are not a legitimate Freemasonic organization and are really just a continuation of the Illuminati. Albert Pike outlined 3 world wars back in 1871. And the Third World War was to incite this violence between the Muslims and Zionists, and then also between the atheists and Christians. And so we see this playing out with Barack Obama as well, when he comes out and says that he is of Muslim faith, and then also saying he is a Christian. They're playing on these angers of us so that we will do the warfare that they need for us to do.
Well, it certainly seems as though everything is playing out along their plans. I'm hopeful that there's another plan that has a more positive outcome than this particular one, because it looks like it's coming to a head this summer, doesn't it?
It definitely does, and they're bringing out all kinds of symbolic representations of this, such as Barack Obama meaning lightning from heaven, and therefore equating to Satan. So if, in Aramaic, if you said, and Satan fell like lightning from heaven, you would say, and Satan fell like Barack Obama. Those are the very words, meaning lightning from heaven. When he rides around in a limousine known as the Beast, and when you play Yes We Can backwards, it says, thank you, Satan, very clearly. These are all the symbolic gestures of America being Satan, along with the rise of Lady Gaga, Eminem, and Pink, because of the high-profile rituals that they put us through as well in these type of ceremonies. There was a point I was getting to. I got lost on the high-profile ritual. But we see that, okay, the looking for the positive, Barack Obama came out, okay, this was the other symbolic gestures was, well, his connections with ancient Egypt, and he went back and they connected him with King Tut. Of course, I connect him and believe him and the entire family are clones of the ancient pharaohs of Akhenaten. Akhenaten, Queen T, and his 2 daughters.
Barakanaten, right?
Yes, exactly, Barakanaten. And even William Henry, he clued into that type, but didn't take it as far as I did, because I firmly believe they are clones, and I have enough evidence to be discussing it. But before we get to that, the whole concept of him, of the symbolic gestures of him, he is now dealing with Apophis, which was the Satan of Akhenaten's religion. So we have in our collective consciousness Russia trying to save the world from Apophis, basically saying that they're trying to save us from Satan. And then we're dealing with Phobos, which means fear. And all of the connections now with Buzz Aldrin saying there's a monolith on Phobos and the Phobos grunt mission that will be launching soon. Phobos is going to be becoming major in people's attention very soon. So here we've got Satan, we've got lightning from heaven, we've got fear and fright. These are all the symbolic psychological aspects that are being played upon us without us really even realizing it. Then what we realize is Barack Obama came out quoting the Hopi end-time prophecy, saying we are the ones that we are waiting for, that we have been waiting for. And you read this Hopi end-time prophecy, and it discusses about letting go of the shore, allowing the current to take you. The time of the lone wolf is over. And we realize that this is where we're at. We need to get caught in the flow. But we are the ones that we are waiting for. And it's not some other elite group out there, not some good wizards at Hogwarts or anything of this nature. It's us that has to come to the realization that we've been under this spell for so long. And then we got to branch out. We've got to learn how to love humans again. That's a critical ingredient. That's one thing they have been really working on. Our image of the human is horrendous. And that's all thanks to the media, thanks to the TV, and also scientific documents that were passed around through scholasticism, like the Club of Rome's limits to growth. That humans are this horrible virus on the planet that need to be eradicated. That's the belief that they have engendered in us. And until we can turn that belief around, we're not going to love one another. And we cannot make the miracles happen, because the miracles of synchronicity occur through other humans. It's not some God dropping a tree down or, a car in front of you or whatever you need at that moment. It's not. It's that human that you just happen to mystically run into at the perfect moment. And if you're not willing, and if you're afraid of these other humans and you're not making contact, then you're missing your life, and you're missing all the soul potential that has been granted you because you've believed the myth, the lie, the delusion that humans are these evil creatures. I stand strongly behind James Redfield's Celestine prophecies. I was, I'm practically a priest of the Celestine prophecies, because it is right there. It's in between the energetic cooperation between human and human and beauty. We're the ones that recognize beauty. We're the amazing beings that can create beauty. We have lost all beauty. Even the plant life that are surrounding our buildings, as you look at landscaping, they're putting in sawgrass, they're putting in prickly plants to keep you safe, to keep you away. It's the same thing with national security, homeland security, all of these types of fears, but security fears, right? We need to release all of those. We need to let all of that go. And even the vibration that is coming from our prickly plants out front is not good for the natural spirit. So we realize that all of the strife and all of the conflict comes from just the simple inability of us to interact with one another. And as James Redfield points out, we need to get control of our control dramas.
Absolutely. There's some things in the world that aren't working right. And like you say, you have to know who is controlling this agenda. And what you have discovered through your research is these are black magicians. Exactly.
Yeah, I always want to clarify for people the difference between magic and sorcery. Because, Christians get all uptight about the idea of magic. But when you read the Bible, you'll find Moses practicing magic in front of the Egyptian magicians. And this was basically, this is Exodus. And, the concepts of magic and religion should go hand in hand. Solomon, he was a practicer of magic, worshiping Asherah, Shamash, and Molech. And then the idea of sorcery. Okay, so magic is the use and the understanding and the cooperation with the natural forces, whereas sorcery is the manipulation of the natural forces for an egoistic end or your own personal design.
So there was also a question in the chat room about, because you talked about the Hopi prophecy, but someone was asking about a ceremony, a Mayan ceremony that you had attended. Is that the same thing?
Well, therein is a truly miraculous tale. And honestly, most of my life is miraculous. And when I tell people my stories, they're like, well, how'd you do that? And honestly, I never thought about how I did it until I was asked. life just brings me to where I need to be, and things are great and wonderful and miraculous and amazing. So I get a contact saying, come down to Guatemala. The Mayans want you to document their first ever all-night ritual for the winter solstice at the pyramids of Tikal. Yeah, right. I'm living on the couch of a jazz band. I'm a homeless kid in Texas because I choose to be. I like to travel. I'm a shaman. And I find, all of a sudden the exact money for the plane ticket falls into my account. Somebody just donated it to me at the exact moment. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't know where I was going. I don't know how to speak Spanish. And I had no money for a return trip. But I was going. And that's the true faith. Now, when people talk about having religious spiritualism, I'm sorry. If you don't have faith, it means nothing. I have faith. I know God has stepped into my life, and that's not a biblical God. That's just the hand of the universe coming down and guiding and helping me all along the way. So I have the liberty to be free because I'm not in fear. And so I just went, and I found myself in amazing events trying to find my way down there. I ended up on the Lake Adelon, a bottomless lake that Jacques Cousteau tried to find the bottom that supposedly a sea monster lives in, and I found myself living under a volcano in Guatemala. And I'm like, oh my God, how did I get here? And then I'm led on this crazy trip with all of the Mayan shamans. For days we traveled together to different rituals, performing rituals to their ancestors, and I had to laugh because they were doing like burnt offerings to their ancestors, and here was one group of shamans burning Ritz crackers and Slim Jims because you want to give them what you enjoy. It was an amazing thing to see. But this ritual had been performed at this particular area forever and ever, and now it was a trash heap, and there were bulldozers and truck drives going all around, dump trucks and everything, all kinds of noise as they were performing these. It was very just across worlds there. But eventually I find myself going to the pyramids of Tikal in what's known as a chicken bus, or a decked-out school bus, brought up to these pyramids, and we're stopped by the government. They were told at first that they were allowed to do this all-night ritual, which is something that's never occurred. And the Mayans said that they had to do it, and that they had expected a tribe of nations to gather at this one particular ritual. It had been prophesied that we would gather. And sure enough, along with me were a group of people representing every nation on this planet. And we all just happened to show up, all just by word of mouth. We were brought to this event. We performed the ritual with the Mayans, and the Mayans, the next day, the entire pyramids were covered in fog. The sun could not be seen rising on the winter solstice, and this was a very bad omen to them. And they told me that the next people to visit the pyramids of Tikal would be the fish, that all of that was going to be underwater, that there was going to be a major catastrophe. And two of these shamans were high ritual Freemasons themselves. And they were actually the ones that got on the phone when the government said that we couldn't go in, and managed to get us in there, even though
when
there was
you talk about the fish, are you saying Awanas?
No, not quite. I love to talk about the merfolk and the fish people and why Starbucks has a goddess with her feet spread. But no, he meant that there was going to be a major crustal shift. The world was going to be underwater. Actually, one of the Masonic shamans, who was also a doctor and a Tata, he came to me and said that the Great White Brotherhood had given him secret knowledge of what the world was going to look like after this major catastrophe. We drove all the way after the ritual to this doctor's house so that he could give me copies of these pictures so that I could present them to the world. I was to be the intergalactic, interplanetary ambassador to the Freemasons, or to the Mayans. But he was a Freemason as well. These pictures that they gave me actually were those that were crafted by Gordon Michael Scallion back in 98, 99, when he was prophesying a crustal shift or predicting crustal shift.
So they just basically gave you Scallion drawings?
Yes.
Okay. So, because that's quite a doom and gloom picture that he has in his maps. The United States is basically split up in the half through the middle. Yellowstone blew half of it away. The California side has gone into the ocean.
Yes.
So they were trying to get you to bring about more fear.
In a way, but at the same time, I mean, he really meant what he was saying to me, and not really to spread fear, but to try and help. But their main message to me was that there is a guiding hand. Of course, the Mayans are heavily into synchronicity. Their whole religion is based on it. That's why they have so many calendars. And they told me that if enough people were to gather in gratitude and burn ceremonial fires around the world, that this would heal the ozone and bring about a transition that would be smooth instead of a catastrophe.
Burning of fires?
Well, more the gratitude in the ceremony.
Okay.
They said people had all lost touch.